My name is Dana Rodebush, and I am so happy to have you here today to discuss multiplication fact fluency in the upper elementary classroom. I first want to give you a brief introduction to myself in case this is the first time you are hearing from me or about me. I have been married to my high school sweetheart, Nick, for almost 20 years now. Together, we have two boys, Ryan, who is 15, and Reese, who is 13. I taught fifth grade for 7 years in my hometown here in Arkansas and decided to step away from the classroom at the end of the 2022-2023 school year to work on building my business, Teacher Tech Studio. And I have recently launched a podcast for upper elementary teachers called Upper Elementary Simplified. This workshop is titled It's a Fact, Students Struggle with Multiplication Fact Fluency. During this workshop, I am going to discuss my thoughts around the struggle that students so often have with multiplication fact fluency and some tips for how you can implement strategies in your upper elementary classroom to build your students' multiplication fact fluency. If after you listen to this workshop you want to find me online, here are the best ways to connect with me. You can find me on either of my two websites, teachertechstudio.com or on my podcast website, upperelementarysimplified.com. I would love to invite you to listen to my new podcast. You can find it by searching Upper Elementary Simplified in your favorite podcast listening app. And finally, you can find me on Instagram at Teacher Tech Studio, and you can request to join my Facebook group, Upper Elementary Simplified. Or if you want to just reach out via email, my email address is at the bottom of your screen, and that is Dana, D-A-N-N-A, at teachertechstudio.com. I want to begin by providing you with a few definitions that you may or may not already be familiar with. The first one is automaticity. Automaticity is the ability to automatically process and recall information resulting from long-term memory commitment. Next is math fact fluency, and this is the automatic recall of basic math facts without conscious effort. And then the last one is computational fluency, and this is the ability to efficiently and accurately calculate. Fact fluency makes computational fluency possible, but they are not the same. Now, let's do a little exercise. Not a physical one, a math exercise. If you have a pencil and a piece of paper, go ahead and jot down this math expression. And I'm going to pause for a few seconds. Now, I am obviously not expecting you to solve the entire expression during that time, but I have a point, so bear with me. So go ahead and write 3,967 times 248 on your paper and start solving it. And no calculators. So, how did you do? You probably did just fine and solved a large portion of the expression. But imagine that you are a fifth grade student who has to draw circles and count to calculate 7 times 8 and 6 times 8 and 9 times 8 and even 3 times 8. And then imagine getting so stressed with the mental frustration of those calculations that you forget the steps of the standard algorithm. Do I multiply 8 by 7 and then 4 by 7, or is it 8 by 6 next? Oh, yeah, and I remember I'm supposed to do something after I finish multiplying the 8 by the digits in the top number. Why is it that I do that? Our students' brains become so overloaded while they are trying to calculate and solve basic facts like 7 times 8 and 4 times 9 that by the time they do finally figure 4 times 9 to equal 36, they have forgotten where they were at in the process. This is even more prevalent when students are trying to divide larger numbers. Basic multiplication fact recall is similar to word recognition when we read. We have to recognize words to comprehend a text, and we also have to recall basic multiplication facts to comprehend higher math. So, should students memorize basic math facts? Yes, absolutely. In fact, it is essential for students to memorize basic math multiplication facts. The development of multiplication fact fluency starts in third grade when students are mostly being introduced to the concept of multiplication. The skills continue to develop in fourth grade with more practice. And by the end of fifth grade, students should have all of the basic multiplication facts through 12 committed to memory. So, why do students need to memorize their basic multiplication facts? Well, the first reason is to relieve the frustration that is sure to build if they don't have these facts memorized. Remember back to the fifth grade student who took so long trying to draw circles and figure out 7 times 8 and 4 times 9 that by the time he got the product, he had forgotten where he was in the process. The next reason is to help them be more efficient in solving higher level math expressions. They aren't having to spend several minutes using counting strategies to figure out the product of 4 times 9. Instead, they can quickly recall these products so that they can move on in the algorithm and to help them be more accurate in the calculations. As I mentioned before, when students have to stop in the middle of the algorithm when they are solving a higher level math expression, they are more likely to get distracted and miss a step in the process, leading to an incorrect solution. So, how can students memorize their basic multiplication facts? Repetition. Students need to be seeing and practicing these facts on a regular basis. Another way is to turn math fact practice into a game. Kids love games, and when we can throw in a little friendly competition, it provides the motivation they need to keep practicing. Finally, you can get parents involved. It takes a village. Get parents on board. Express to them how important it is that their student practice building multiplication fact fluency. But how do I even begin to provide this type of multiplication fact fluency building? I'm glad you asked. When I was in the classroom, I used to be so shocked by how many fifth graders would come to me not having their basic multiplication facts memorized. So I developed a system. It was very basic at the time and has since grown and become very comprehensive. I'm so confident in this system, and I want it to be used in as many classrooms as possible. That after I introduce it to you, I'm going to provide you with a special discount code to purchase it for your own classroom. But don't worry, even if you decide not to use my Math Facts Simplified program, you can still use the basic concepts that I teach. You just won't have it already designed and created for you. Before I show you the comprehensive program, I want to give you a few guidelines that make this system unique. First of all, this system works best with fourth, fifth, and sixth grade students simply because third grade math learning has a stronger focus of introducing multiplication and basic multiplication facts. However, third grade teachers can still use this program to build fluency after they have introduced the facts to their students. It does take some time up front, but it is so worth it. It is helpful if you have students excited about the program, so it is a good idea to offer incentives. I have used candy in the past, but you could also incentivize with lunch in the classroom, a special privilege of some type, or simply use the brag tags that are included with the program. It is also helpful if you inform parents and guardians and request their support. If parents are committed to the program, then they can encourage math fact practice outside of school, which speeds up the whole process of memorization. And finally, probably the biggest characteristic of the Math Facts Simplified program is that it assesses students on every math fact through 12 and their reciprocals. Many years ago, before I started using this strategy in my own classroom, I used to base math fact mastery on our district provided math fact computer program until I really started to dig deep into those computer programs. And when I did, I was disappointed because the computer program would score my students as fully mastered when they hadn't been assessed on every fact. I realized this when I would see certain students still struggling with 9 times 8 or 6 times 7, and I'm thinking, why is this student's name on the math fact mastery wall? So, what is mastery? The student who has mastered his or her multiplication facts can recall the product of every math fact 1 through 12. That means 1 times 1 all the way through 12 times 12. The student can accurately recall every math fact through 1 through 12 within 3 to 5 seconds. And the student has completely memorized every math fact 1 through 12 without the use of remedial strategies. So, no nines tricks, no counting strategies, and no skip counting. There are 3 main steps to how this fact fluency building program works. I'm going to first tell you the steps, and then I will break each one of them down into more detail. And remember, even if you choose not to use my program, you can still use these concepts. Step 1 is to introduce the program to your students and build hype around math fact fluency development. Step 2 is to pre-assess your students and track the facts that they have mastered and the ones that they need to practice. And step 3 is to allow students to practice with 5 facts from their list at a time and then recheck within 4 days until all facts are mastered. So, first, you are going to want to introduce the program to your students, but not just introduce it. You are going to really build some excitement and motivation for them to get invested in mastering their math facts. If you are going to offer incentives for each level of mastery, tell them that at this introduction. Nothing motivates quite like a good incentive. This is the time to instill in your students that fact fluency tests shouldn't be scary. Oftentimes, when students find out they are going to be taking any type of test, especially one that requires them to be under a scary timer, they will immediately shut down and get anxious. Instead, make students excited and motivate them. Instead of saying, we are going to take 5 timed math fact tests, say, this extra practice challenge is going to help you become a better mathematician and will make math easier for you in the future. Explain the process to your students. What will be expected of them? How long will each phase last? How will they be assessed? What can they do outside of school to help them move quicker through the challenge? And most importantly, tell them the why behind this challenge. This is going to make you a better mathematician. You know how you seem to struggle when you are trying to work out larger math problems? That will get better over time as you start to commit your multiplication facts to memory. Really make them excited to have the burden of counting circles every time they need to figure out 8 times 9 lifted and out of their way. After you have introduced the challenge to your students, next you will begin the pre-assessments. And this is the part that is the most time-consuming for you, but I promise you it is so worth the time you put in. I call these assessments math fact mastery checks because this sounds a lot less intimidating than timed math fact tests. There are 5 assessments, and each one includes 25 facts for a total of 125. Now, I do include all facts 1 through 12 with reciprocals, with the exception of 0 and 1, and there are only 1 of each of these. Because once you know that the student knows 1 times 4 equals 4 and 0 times 2 equals 0, then you shouldn't need to assess the rest of the 0 and 1 facts. But I definitely assess all of the reciprocals besides zeros and ones because sometimes students view 6 times 7 differently than they see 7 times 6. There are three ways you can assess your students. You can have the whole class take the same written test at the same time and do your best to monitor that they are moving at the appropriate pace. You can assess small groups of students. This is a little bit easier to manage if you have a small group of 3 to 5 students taking the same written test, so you can make sure they are moving at the appropriate pace. The best and most accurate, but also most time consuming option is to individually assess your students by calling out each fact expression for them to verbally recall back to you. While assessing students individually is very time consuming, it is so worth it. This is how I did it in my classroom. So, why is individual assessment the best? The first reason is that you can control the pace that the students respond to each fact. If a student has a math fact memorized, he or she will be able to recall the product automatically within 3 to 5 seconds or even faster. When you are verbally calling out expressions for students and they hesitate any longer than 5 seconds, or if they show any signs of you using counting strategies, then you can go ahead and mark that fact as one to practice. And finally, when you are the one recording student responses, you can keep accurate data about which facts need to be practiced versus trusting that students didn't spend any longer than 5 seconds on one of the facts when they are taking the written test without you right there controlling the pace. So, how can you individually assess your students? You can call them over to you one at a time during independent work and when the room is quiet so the student that is assessing can concentrate. Only assess 25 facts at a time. I have done a lot more than this, and it just gets too overwhelming for the student. And lastly, you will mark the correctly answered facts with a check, hesitations for more than 5 seconds with a line, and any facts that are unanswered, incorrectly answered, or the student wants to skip, you will leave blank on your data tracker. After you have all of your data of which facts each student needs to practice for mastery, it's time to start assigning practice facts. You will give students 5 facts from their list to study and commit to memory. You will allow students 3 to 5 days to practice with their assigned list of facts. And then after 3 to 5 days, call each student back over individually to do a recheck using the same methods as the pre assessment. If they answer correctly within 3 to 5 seconds, you can mark the date mastered on their data tracker. If they still don't have that automatic 3 to 5 second recall or there is any hesitation, keep that fact on their list. Then you will give the student a new list with 5 new facts to practice. You'll want to come up with a system for marking the facts on your data tracker that you assign at each recheck. When I was in the classroom, I would just put a dot next to the fact I assigned using a different colored pen and write that day's date on a master list page in my data tracker so I could go back and see what date each list of facts was originally assigned according to the color pen that I marked it in. I would use that same color pen to write the date of the mastery if the student mastered that fact. If they still needed to practice a fact, a new dot in a new color goes next to it when you reassign it at a later date. Each new list you assign should be 5 fresh facts, with the exception that the student doesn't need to practice with very many facts and there aren't enough on their list to give them 5 new facts at each recheck. And then you're going to repeat until every student has mastered every fact on their list. So, what happens when a student meets mastery? Well, this is completely up to you, but here are a few ideas. You could have them sign a special wall in your classroom In my classroom, I decorated our closet door, and they were able to sign their names there as they mastered their facts. You could set up a prize system that allows students to earn small prizes for each set of mastered facts. And my favorite is to set up a system where you have milestone checkpoints and give prizes incrementally as students hit each milestone. For example, when a student masters 25 facts, he or she gets a small prize, like a piece of candy. Then, when the student reaches 50 facts mastered, the prize goes up to maybe a gum pass for the day. And then so on in increments of 25 until you get to the grand prize, which could be something really big, like you provide lunch for the student, or you could even get the principals involved and ask if they can contribute a special experience or something to the prize. You may also want to have a plan in place to offer to students who start out past a milestone. For example, if a student begins with 100 facts already mastered, then that student would earn all four prizes for 25, 50, 75, and 100. And then they would be working toward 125. This way, they don't feel like they're missing out by not starting out with more facts to practice. So, what if I told you that you could implement this multiplication fact mastery program in your own classroom, and all you would need to do to set it up is make some copies and collect your incentive prize items? You can do that with my Math Fact Simplified, my original comprehensive multiplication fact fluency building program for upper elementary students. So, what is included in the Math Fact Simplified program? All of the teacher prep and information about how the program works is included. The fully editable parent letter is great for informing your adult supporters about the challenge that your students are about to begin. You will be able to introduce the challenge to your students with a text editable slide presentation to build excitement and anticipation. Several different binder cover designs and binder spine designs are included, so you can set up your data tracking binder in style. The program includes 5 printable math fact assessments titled Math Fact Mastery Checks for you to use if you decide to assess your students using the written format. The Math Fact Mastery Data Tracker is the page you will use to record your students' responses to the pre assessments and their progress as they move through the program. It includes every fact 1 through 12 and space to record student responses and mastery. Each student will have one page that is double-sided. The Math Fact Mastery study lists are the templates that you will fill in with the 5 facts that you are assigning to your students in a single session. These lists print 9 per page, and I suggest that you store them in a plastic pencil box and keep several copies because you will go through them quickly. And then finally, you will get brag tags and certificates to use if you choose to do so. If you are ready to check out the Math Facts Simplified program, you can find it at teachertechstudio.com/mathfacts. And again, if you would like to connect with me, you can find me on either of my 2 websites, on my podcast, Upper Elementary Simplified, on Instagram and Facebook, or simply by email. I really hope that you have enjoyed this workshop and that you were able to take away some ideas and inspiration to build multiplication fact fluency in your own classroom. Until next time, keep life simple.